everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to the Division 2. And today, as you might have seen the devs advertise or me shout out in my video yesterday, today was the Battle for Brooklyn DLC and Year 7 Season 1 Q&A stream that the developers hosted, where, as the name implies, they wanted to take community questions and answer some of the most commonly asked things about this upcoming content. As you all know by now, all of this stuff, the DLC, Year 7, the new gear, everything is coming next week on Tuesday, May 27th. And so they wanted to come out and kind of address some of these big topics while they still can. So in the stream, we were joined by Yannick, who is the game's creative director, and Leo, who is one of our new community developers. And yeah, this stream had a bit of a different format than usual, where they have a bunch of things to present. Normally, this was just them sitting here, answering questions. And so, as per usual, I watched, took my notes, and I want to report to you all the most important information that came out of this. There are a couple of things that I wanted to address right off the top here, things that they talked about during the stream, but are pretty important for everybody who is looking forward and paying attention to this DLC's release. Firstly, they confirmed that there are no pre-orders planned for Battle for Brooklyn. The purchase for the DLC is going to open up on May 27th at 8 a.m. Central European Summertime. Of course, feel free to convert that to your global time zone. If you're in North America like myself, that converts to 11 p.m. on May 26th if you're in the Pacific time zone, or 2 a.m. on May 27th if you're in the Eastern time zone. So, according to them, that is when the DLC will be able to be purchased, whether it is on your console platform store, whether it is on the Ubisoft store, so keep that date and time in mind. They also confirmed that another developer stream is on the way prior to the launch of the update. This is where they will reveal stuff like the trailer for the DLC for Year 7 Season 1. They're going to have more reveals. They did not confirm a specific date for this, though I imagine it will likely be the day before, as per usual. So in this case, it would be on Monday, May 26th. When and if we get those details, I'll let you all know, and of course, I will recap that stream next week too. But before we dive into this, I just wanted to say I went through all of the questions that were asked. There were many of dozens. I tried to trim out and avoid some of the obvious ones that we seem to cover pretty much every single stream. Stuff like people asking about when are we getting more stash space, or what's happening with the spec revamp, all of that. That said, if you do want to watch the entire VOD of them going through these questions, the whole stream was about an hour long. The link for that will be down in the description of this video. Feel free to check it out. Alright, and then lastly, they kind of went through a loose structure in this stream in terms of what questions were asked in what order. I will try and reorder this and timestamp things by category, so feel free to look for those chapters, but again, might not be perfect. I'll try my best. But let's get right to it. They begin with talking about questions mostly from the Battle for Brooklyn DLC. Again, I've cut out some of the obvious ones like people asking, are we gonna get snow? They've already said, no, this is in autumn. But let's get to it. The first question was, do older Golden Ultimate Editions of the Division 2 include Battle for Brooklyn? Meaning, if I bought the Ultimate Edition when the game launched, do I still need to buy this DLC? The answer is yes. There are new versions of the Golden Ultimate Edition that will include Battle for Brooklyn moving forward, but previous editions do not include it. You will need to buy it separately. There was a question of, will we be locked in Brooklyn during the campaign progress, much like we were during Warlords? The answer is no, we will not be. Since there is no level increase coming with Battle for Brooklyn, that means that there is no progression parameters that they need to keep you locked into. So once you begin it, you can go back to DC, go to New York, do whatever you want to do. Narrative was a big subject here. Of course, they're not going to spoil anything, but in general, people were asking about, do the narrative events of the DLC play into the larger Division 2 story? There's been a lot of concerns about it being completely isolated. They had a long-winded answer, but basically they said Brooklyn is an isolated story, right? They want people who have never played the Division 2 to be able to step into it and understand, but at the same time, it does take place in the same timeline as the current story and game. It is after Year 6 Season 3. It is still the same world and many of the characters that we are familiar with, so therefore there will be certain amounts of crossover and things like that. And then in many ways they went on to emphasize that the Crossroads season that is also launching next week, that is the convergence between the old and the new, with us returning to the Division 1's area, getting new stuff. So yeah, we'll see what plays out. There was a question about the Division 1's original tutorial zone. It was asked, was this new Brooklyn map built from scratch? Was it built basically on top of that? How did that work? And their answer was from scratch. The Division 1 area was of course a direct reference. They wanted to take stuff how it was there and really evolve it in the in-game time frame that it's been since we visited those areas. But on a technical side, the Division 2 is on a different version of the engine. They use different tools to make stuff in the Division 2, so you cannot just take stuff from the Division Division 1 and plop it into the Division 2. But yes, they said that entire tutorial zone will be explorable here. However, the map of the DLC is much larger than just that original zone. This led to the question of, if you own Battle for Brooklyn and Warlords of New York, will you be able to freely travel between Brooklyn and the New York map, probably across the Manhattan Bridge? The answer is no. Unfortunately, people asked what kind of replayability will the Brooklyn DLC have, and their answer is mostly what we already know, saying there is more to discover after the initial campaign and completion, like going after all of the world bosses, diving into the hunter puzzles. They highlighted how world missions, which are the new name for side missions, are now fully replayable. They did confirm, however, that these will have targeted loot allocation, which is a pretty big deal. Because they're so much shorter than a main mission, they said it is very likely that some of these missions may become popular spots to farm on days when they have an ideal target. And then they also confirmed that priority objectives will filter in Brooklyn as a location, so there will be reasons to go back and play the content on this map. Even though they've basically addressed this already, I wanted to include it in here. People asked, will we see a new incursion coming for the DLC? They said it is currently not the plan, but if they were to do a new incursion in the future, it likely would not be tied to DLC ownership. They want that to be available to everybody. People asked if there were going to be any additional exotic items coming with the DLC beyond the one Catalyst mask that we've already been shown. And I thought this is a good question because if you remember back to Warlords of New York, where stuff like the tardigrade and a few other exotics were completely absent from the marketing campaign, we pretty much discovered those once the expansion went live. But their answer was no, that the only exotic they have planned is the new Catalyst mask. I guess we'll see if there are any surprises waiting. There were questions about the new level 40 boost that we are getting with the DLC. Firstly, is the new boost infinitely usable? The answer is yes. Once you own the DLC, anytime you make a new character, the option to start that character at level 40 will exist. When boosting to level 40, are all of the blueprints for things like weapons and mods going to be unlocked? The answer was no. Much like the level 30 boost, you will still need to go and farm out those different blueprints. People also wanted to know, will the level 30 boost still exist if you wanted to do that flow and go through the Warlords campaign? And the answer was yes, they're not taking that away. Moving back to some more general DLC questions, people wondered, will any of the Brooklyn missions offer legendary difficulty? The answer was no, but they said that adding legendary content to more of the game is not off the table, and it is something that they'd like to explore. Here is a big question. People asked, because this is such a Division 1 nostalgic update in DLC, will the Lexington, which was obviously a homage to the Division 1, return with this update? And it was very heavily implied yes. They did not outright confirm it, let me be very clear, but Yannick said maybe if not on day 1, it is probably likely that we will see the Lexington return at some point during this next season.
Now a question that I got a lot in our forums and also I've been seeing in the chat as well. Given that we're returning to Brooklyn, will the Lexington be brought back for players who miss it?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not Brooklyn itself, but yeah, we may bring it back here.
Okay.
And then finally, people asked, are there surprises in the DLC that have yet to be discussed? And the answer was yes, so I'm looking forward to finding out about those. Alright, then they moved on to talking a bit more about general Year 7 and Seasons kind of plans. The first question was, are there plans to make Seasons more dynamic moving forward by introducing stuff like limited time modes, changing events, all of that? The response was, we haven't discussed much of our detailed Year 7 plans yet, as I'm sure a lot of you know from watching my video that I made on that. What they did say, however, was we want to continue evolving Seasons, and part of that includes furthering the promise and fantasy of each season, right? Further aligning all different elements of it, stuff like modifiers, gear, gameplay experiences. They want to make all of that in a coherent theme. And so in essence, the answer was yes. The intention is to continue delivering more new experiences with Seasons. More specifically, people said, do you see future seasons including further new gameplay experiences beyond just modifiers? They gave experimental modes as one example. And again, essentially the answer was yes. Maybe not experimental modes directly, but they said we want to continue trying more new things. This will now be the third season under the Seasons 2.0 model, and they said that their idea of what a season under that should look like is, forming up more and more with community feedback. And so they said they want to continue trying new things, and just like they said with modifiers in the past, stuff that is super popular might still stick around in the long term. Apparently they got a lot of questions submitted about the new wrapper for the open world, which was a particular tease that they gave during the Year 7 breakdown. And so the question was, can they elaborate on that at all? They said, we want to try and make the open world a more interesting and dynamic space within the game, have it react to you in more direct ways. They want to turn it into an activity that is more meaningful and meaty on top of the existing activities that you're familiar with. And so Yannick said this is not quite a new game mode that they're working on, but it is a feature that is going to go on on top of everything that you're accustomed to in the open world. There was a question of if we can expect to see stuff similar to the Brooklyn activation caches that people are farming out in the game right now. Will those return in future seasons? And they said the idea is to reintroduce the stretch goals feature each new season. Yes, probably towards the end of each season. However, they said that each new event in cache will be different, so they want to kind of look at what worked with this one, what didn't work. And so the underlying question and response here is that they don't fully know yet if we will see stuff like raid exotics come back in these future ones, but we will see. They got a question of, is the new Tinkerer exotic mask that everybody loved from the PTS, which is basically Alpha Bridge 2.0 if you played the Division 1, will that be available from the Season Pass, or will it be tied to Year 7 Season 1's Climax mission? And the response was the Climax mission, so we are going to have to wait a little bit into this new season before we can access that. There was a question of if the new measured assembly gear set is going to destroy grenades on top of the skill proxies, to make it a bit more like the Division 1. The answer was no. The primary focus for it is skill stuff and skill proxies. The topic of game difficulty was brought up, with people asking, will the time to kill be adjusted given that power creep is very real right now in the Division 2's endgame? And Yannick's response was that he thinks the issue is more with overall difficulty compared to specifically time to kill. Firstly, he said they want to make sure that other roles rather than just pure damage are important to the endgame, and they are working on kind of making that a reality. And he said that they also have thoughts and plans to bring more difficulty beyond stuff like the recently introduced master difficulty, but he said we'll have to stay tuned to kind of hear what some of their plans and thoughts are on that. Alright, moving on, they took a few questions about the upcoming Scavenging Points revamp, given that is a pretty big topic right now within the community. This one was a video question submission by DJ Tickle, shout out to him, and he asked kind of a bunch of stuff. He said, with the watch changes coming, we know the material rewards are being increased by 3, that was announced this last week, but he asked, does this include stuff like optimization materials with shade calibration and field recon data? Can you elaborate any more on some of the economy plans that you've teased for Year 7? What's going to be happening with hardcore characters? So they tackled these in a few different orders, firstly saying that hardcore characters will have their own Scavenging Points pool. It will not be the same as the normal character pool. Also, resources are going to remain shared as they are right now, again assuming you buy the blueprint from Anaya, but that does not include hardcore characters. They then went on to actually show a very handy table that they've drawn up for the new Scavenging Points material yield with the current live game, and then compared to the new values in Year 7 Season 1. And the bottom line answer from that is that every single material is being increased by 3, including the optimization ones. So feel free to screenshot this, use it wherever you like, and again, these are the values that we can expect in the game starting next week. There was a question of if there would be any nerfs or resets on people's progression overall due to the Scavenging Points revamp. The answer was no, but they said, as we have already announced, down the line we are going to be taking the time to look at things like overall endgame progression, expertise upgrade costs, all of that. So we'll have to see what some of their plans are there. People then asked, are other materials that are currently character bound being looked into to be made account wide? This includes stuff like credits, food, etc. Their response was, we need to go in and look at why they are separate right now. If there was an important game design reason for why they are that way, they might likely stay that way. But if there's not an important reason, then they said we would definitely look into making it account wide. Alright, they then moved into kind of more general questions, taking people's inquiries from the live chat, things like that. So this will cover a bunch of different topics. Firstly, there was a question about when will people receive the prior Twitch drops from the previous campaign that has had a lot of issues with the distribution, and their answer was, we are unhappy with how the last campaign played out, with a lot of people still not having their rewards. They said they are actively investigating that to see if they can fix up the issue and get people those rewards. But they said that if we cannot find a good resolution, then we are going to find a way to just grant it to all players. They said specifically, we will not forget, right? We want to get these out to you, so that's promising. There was a question of if they're going to remove the 999 exotic components from those who took advantage of the recent glitch with the stretch caches. The answer was no, they don't have plans to do that, nor are they going to hand out any bans for people who took advantage of it. The question then came around, as it always does, are they going to do anything about the cheaters in the game? People say that many reports go unresponded, and there's been a big rise recently in cheating. This was more or less the same answer that we usually get, but Yannick did go into a bit more detail, so I thought I would include it. He said, we of course can't describe our anti-cheat efforts too elaborately, or we risk allowing people to be able to bypass some of those efforts. He said that their system auto-blocks a lot of cheat engines by default, but others are able to get through, and then have to be, of course, manually reviewed. He did confirm that reporting each individual incident you run into is still the best method, but that will not always result in an immediate ban, as processes need to happen behind the scenes for them to investigate those claims, look into it all. So yeah, he said he knows from the player perspective it can look like not a lot is happening here, but that they are doing their best to try and curb the amount of cheating that goes on in the game. People asked, once Brooklyn drops, are projects and priority objectives going to incorporate its content into their, missions and objectives? The answer was yes and yes. They said for projects, this will be in a more limited capacity as they don't want to force people to purchase the DLC, but yes, it should be present in both. Someone asked if the new Purple Flame gameplay mechanic would be added beyond just Brooklyn content. They said that there are currently no plans to introduce it beyond Brooklyn, but they could use it in specific cases for things they do in the future, so we'll see. The usual question of are there any plans coming up for PvP? Yannick said nothing to announce for now, but they do have some thoughts, so maybe that's a little bit encouraging. People asked, much like the Lexington, are the Turmoil knee pads going to come back around as they were only available for a week back in April? The answer was maybe, but I will say that this answer seemed a bit less definitive than the Lexington, so it seems like maybe while they have a plan for the Lexington, they're still working out the best timing to bring these back. This was a pretty big one. Someone asked, will there be a cap on expertise at some point? Because as of now, every new update has raised the expertise level. That's going to continue heading into this next season, and Yannick said flat out that a cap is being considered. And moreover, he said that taking a look at the entire expertise system overall is probably something they need to do, so yeah, that might be coming. There was a question of if Brooklyn will have a new stronghold tied to it, and they said that not by name, but that some of the main missions in there are longer than others. They said specifically the final mission is pretty darn long. So yeah, I'm excited to play that next week. The topic of expertise in PvP came up. Of course, there's a big issue right now with people saying that the Dark Zone is very imbalanced with expertise being available in there compared to Conflict where they disable it. And Yannick said that overall that topic and just normalization in PvP is an ongoing discussion. They recognize the problem with expertise being active in the Dark Zone, and so he said that they are looking into solutions for this problem, which is good to hear. There was a question of if we would get more loadout slots. They said that there are no specific plans, but it would be nice. The usual question of if we are going to get an open all cache option. They acknowledged that this is a very popular request and that it would be nice. They said, though, as they've said before, that there are some technical issues and other considerations they need to think about instead of just adding that option. Stuff like, if your inventory fills up, do all of those items go on the ground? What do we do with them? But while talking about this, Yannick did acknowledge the volume of requests in the chat of people saying we really want to see this. So it definitely seems like something that's on their radar. Finally, people asked if we are going to be getting more items from the Chinese version of the game, specifically cosmetic stuff that they do. And Yannick said that it is on a case-by-case basis. They've done it before for some stuff that fits more thematically with our version of the Division 2, but he said straight up that there is a lot of stuff that they do not want to bring to the international version, and that leads pretty directly into the question that people have asked if we are ever going to get the dinosaur outfit that they have in the Chinese version, and his answer was a straight up no. And I think it's pretty clear that this stuff does not really align with the thematics of how the Division really should be, and so yeah, they don't have plans to bring that kind of stuff over. All right, everybody, well that is just about everything that we've got going over this live stream developer Q&A for Battle for Brooklyn in Year 7. It still turned into a pretty long video despite me trying to cut out some of the redundant questions that were asked. So if you watched all the way through, I appreciate it. I hope you got the information you were looking for. I would love to hear any and all thoughts you have about this Q&A. Were there any questions that they answered that you liked the answers of, you weren't satisfied with? Anything they did not address that you would love to have the answers for? Whatever you may be thinking, leave it down below. As always, I'm curious to read through it. Stay tuned for more info on that next dev stream that they teased. I'll certainly let you know when that's coming up. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you back soon. Until then, RogueGold. Ow.